Graziano. I'm a licensed funeral director who oversees my family's funeral homes, Cox and Graziano of both Mamaroneck and Greenwich, and the Zion Memorial Chapel of Westchester. Every week I come to you discussing important topics and sensitive matters that all of us need to pause and reflect upon at some point, and through this show, I hope to provide a platform to do so. If you're joining us this morning on 1460 WVOX, welcome, and we'll take questions, comments, and calls to 914-636-0110. Good morning to the control room, and good morning, Facebook Live viewers. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Hello to Tim behind the camera. A familiar face you're going to be seeing across from me this morning, Rev Andrea Raynor, a well-known face in Westchester. She is in Rye. You are with Christchurch.
No, I'm just a chaplain to the fire department.
Just
there.
a chaplain to, well,
yeah.
Okay. But very familiar face, chaplain to the Rye Fire Department, former hospice chaplain, one of the actual first responders to 9/11. We'll talk about that. Author, wife, and mother, Rev Andrea Raynor with us. And we're talking about finding hope for the holidays. I am very happy to be partnering with her to put on an event for the community that we will discuss throughout the show. But no matter who you are or where you are, the holidays this upcoming season will present some type of struggle. This is a different year, a different landscape, and nothing from last year is the same in any shape of the word for so many of us. And it's hard to find hope. And as the season is coming upon us, usually once the Halloween decorations come down, the trees and the Christmas trees pop up, and that will present many challenges. So Reverend Andrea is here to talk about finding hope for the holidays. Good morning, Reverend Andy.
Good morning, Jen. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Every time you come on air and you sit at that microphone, you don't realize how many people you inspire, but I always get the feedback that you gave such a great show, so I'm happy that you're here this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself? Because my introduction doesn't really do you justice. You're so much more than that. Talked a bit about who you are, the books that you've authored, and what your mission really is to give hope and inspiration.
Oh, thanks, Jen. Yeah, I'm a United Methodist minister. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I've been a proud New Yorker for 32 years now. And I spent most of my ministry as a hospice chaplain, both here in Westchester and also in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
I served as a hospice chaplain for about 21 years.
Okay.
And then just recently, Greenwich Hospital, where I was working, decided to close our department, which might have been a little short-sighted, but who knew COVID was coming?
Absolutely. Who could have ever forecasted what would happen?
So I'm really just focusing right now on doing some bereavement counseling. I do have 4 books, as you know, you've been so supportive about those, Jen. And one of them, which is probably the most timely right now, is The Alphabet of Grief.
I was just going to say.
We talked about that when it came out. And just very small book. It's very accessible. And you know, other than that, I'm just continuing to work on a new book. And
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So in your grief work, this near lifetime that you've spent focusing on this, what is the commonality that unites everyone who grieves? Is it that they're searching for hope, they're searching for comfort, or are they searching just to get through their grief and not feel bad anymore? What is it that you found in your work that collectively unites everyone who struggles?
Well, really, the thing that unites us the most is love.
Mm-hmm.
Because people who grieve are people who have loved. And so for an extended period has some time to acclimate to the fact that their loved one may be dying, or it may be someone who's had a long battle with cancer. By the time that death happens, there's both sorrow and some relief for the sufferer. And then, you know, as we both know, when there's a sudden event or feels like a sudden event, then that grief takes a different shape. But the thing that unites us is really, the human part of us wants our loved ones here.
Right.
We want our loved ones here with us, and acclimating to their physical absence is such a challenge. Even those who are religious, you know, of any faith, and have a hope that they'll see their loved one again or that they're at peace, you know, we still want our loved ones here.
I think it is that physical separation
Absolutely.
that brings that, you know, if you are in tune with your faith, you do believe that there's something after. And
Right.
although it provides some comfort, it's somewhat minimal because it's the physical, it's the not seeing, not hearing. I tend to find not hearing the voice. For so many years, people had told me that just through my work at the funeral home, they just wanted to hear them, or they'd play an old message, or you want to watch an old movie to
Right.
hear them. And going through it myself, I have to say, I it's an understatement to say you just want to hear someone. So physical separation of death, the permanency that they won't be back, those are such struggles, and they're just magnified in these last 2 months of the year.
Absolutely.
Grief just shoots up exponentially now. But this year it's so different because there are likely going to be some physical separations that you're probably not going to see these large family gatherings this year. So it's almost as if everyone grieves this year, whether or not you have a person that's not at the table through death, or you might not have several people that are not there through circumstance. So help us find some inspiration in that. How do you get through the holidays if you don't have your traditional table in place?
I think the first thing, and I think what you're doing now and what the program that you're creating for November is so important is actually anticipating it. Some people are afraid to think about it, and then it's just such a surprise and such a shock. So I think beginning to anticipate that it will be different, whether you're missing that loved one at the table, there's an empty spot at the table, or whether you normally travel to family and you're not doing that this year, and maybe you've been separated from the loved one who's died, and so that also has magnified it. So I think anticipating, maybe thinking of how you're going to handle it. I encourage families who have lost a loved one recently not to be afraid to name it in some way when they gather. Sometimes people are afraid if they bring it up, it'll make everyone sad, but it's the elephant in the room. We're already sad. So some families, maybe before dinner, they raise a glass, they make a toast to their loved one. Others will light a candle and say, we know that Mom is, here in spirit, and she's happy that we're together, and you light a candle. So I think trying to figure out some sort of moment where you acknowledge the loss. And with our current pandemic, with families not gathering, there are ways to be together. I know everyone's sick of screen time and Zoom time, but even maybe a moment of a FaceTime, live or something.
I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. We've all been reduced to these boxes on our screen, and there's such a human need for contact,
Absolutely.
I feel. I mean, I'm a hugger, so, you want to just give somebody a hug, hello, and just that face-to-face interaction. Although the screen allows you the visibility, it doesn't replace that human contact, that human interaction. And actually, I worry for my 8-year-old daughter to say, what will she know? Like, that will become so commonplace just to interact through a screen. You do worry about children and how they are able to relate to people in real time. Speaking of children, that's an interesting perspective, that you want to provide as much normalcy as you can for children. But this is a year where, Macy's isn't doing the Santa Village. I don't believe there's a Thanksgiving Day parade. Am I right about that? In Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade? If anybody's watching, if you want to fact check me on that, Tim will monitor your response. But that is probably going to be different, even going to see Santa. I probably think that might not happen in the malls or the photo ops. Nothing's going to look familiar to them. And then gatherings that they may have anticipated with family and cousins might not happen. How do we speak to our children differently? How do we assure them that they're okay when really the world around them is not okay?
Well, I think trying to find creative ways to make new traditions and new fun. It could be, maybe you're not a baker, but you're going to make those Christmas cookies with your child because we need a new tradition. Or it could be involving them in some letter writing to elderly shut-in people. Like there are ways that you can use it as a teachable moment to not to put more on the kids, which they're just having such a hard time right now. But maybe to think of some new traditions, and again, that open communication and also encouragement. We will get through this. This isn't going to be forever. even though we don't know the timing, and I wouldn't put a time frame on it,
Right.
but just a lot of praise that, gosh, you're just doing so great. You're, you're inspiring me, and I'm going to be better about wearing my mask or being cheerful or whatever it is. So maybe think of creatively some new kinds of traditions. And if family's going to be separated, can we send something, to Uncle Bob to let him know that we're thinking of him?
Reaching out is still so important.
Yeah.
There are ways to let people know that you're thinking, that you're with them even when you're not. I want to talk a little bit about hope for the holidays. And again, I'm so happy to be working with you on this. So on Saturday, November 21st at 2 p.m., we're inviting people to come to Cox and Graziano. We're going to do it outside under a heated tent. Socially distanced, chairs will be appropriately spaced apart. Families will be allowed to sit closer together. But this is an event that we're doing before the holidays strategically. It's the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And we picked that strategically knowing that the floodgates of emotion are going to open for so many people once that first holiday hits. And we cannot deny the actual loss and death that has marked the year 2020. And it's going to be rough. So we're inviting people to come.
I have an update.
Oh, an
here.
update. Yes.
Chris Ann chimed in here.
Hi, Chris Ann.
And she says there is a parade, but not live and not a long route, a shorter one. And there'll be some performances in front of Macy's, and some may be taped. And I don't think that, and she doesn't think there's going to be a Santa at Macy's either. So
That part I heard.
there's your-
Thank you
there's
for the
your
update, Chris. And you know what? It's further proof to what we were saying, that nothing is the same. Nothing's the same at all. Thank you. See, I knew somebody would be watching out there. But getting back to the event, for anyone who has lost someone, you don't have to come to Cox and Graziano. This is open for the community at large. We're going to have flyers. We're going to have ways that you can sign up, because reservations will be important because of the climate in which we're living in. We can't open it up to everyone. We will have a limited capacity. But we invite you to come for an afternoon of hope, and that's the message. And Reverend Andy will be leading us in an interfaith service. We're going to have a candle lighting service to symbolize the light that still shines, although it might be muddled by extra darkness right now and heaviness. There's light somewhere if we can only find it. And then it'll be followed by a bereavement discussion. So there's going to be a lot of ways that you can hear about that. But Reverend Andy, talk to us a bit about what your mission is in doing this and how you plan to help people find hope for the holidays.
I think the first thing, again, is the anticipation and the acknowledgement that it's going to be hard. Or maybe, I don't want to make the pronouncement that it's going to be hard. It might be a challenge, and it might be, painful or tearful. And in my experience, the anticipation is almost harder than the actual event.
That's very true.
When I have led bereavement groups and we're coming up to the holidays and people are anticipating it, they're dreading it. The Thanksgiving table is such a profound place for families that sometimes that is more dreaded than a Christmas, unless there's small children involved. But knowing, if I could just reassure people that anticipation is sometimes harder than the actual event. And so knowing in your heart that, this is gonna be a challenge, coming to Cox and Graziano for this event, I think there'll be some relief that collectively, when people come together out of love, I think it was Helen Keller said, you're part of the largest community in the world is the company of the bereaved. Because if we've loved, we've lost someone. And so to come together in this way is a hopeful thing, that knowing we're not alone, that others are also mourning people. And in our nation, over 200,000 people now have died. So we're kind of holding them in our heart as well. And as I walk with families in my own life, I realize that a heart that's broken open can hold the whole world. It's just you are discussing, but you can also then have the space to be with other people. So the hope is that our loved ones are with us, whether we believe in an afterlife or not. They're in the stories that we tell. And I think that's a wonderful thing during the holidays, to tell those stories and we'll see how much of them are still here with us in that expression, in the walk of a grandchild or the laugh of a sibling. They're there.
I do believe that, and very profound. Actually, I had never heard the Helen Keller quote before, so thank you for sharing that. You know, this is a time that's it's difficult to equate this time to any other time in our history. You know, we think back on 9/11. That comes to mind because that was just a time of collective sorrow, nationwide loss and sorrow and heaviness. Do you feel that this mimics that's some of the same, and you were part of that, you were down there, you were at ground zero, and I'd like you to talk a bit about your work there and how that's impacted you. But do you find that the same rules apply for navigating through this time versus that time, 20 years ago, roughly?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that's going to be 20 years ago.
Coming
this
up in
coming
20
fall.
years, yes.
Well, as we all know, at 9/11, our nation and the world we watched a mass casualty. We watched a mass murder taking place right before our eyes. We might not have seen the people inside the building. Certainly many of us saw the people who felt like they needed to escape the fire and jump out of the buildings. And that the shock of that tremendous event was so, it was just so shocking for the nation that it has taken a long, long time for us to even reconcile the fact that violence and that loss happened. On the flip side, we saw the best of the human spirit. We saw first responders coming. We saw the nation coming together. You know, as I drove from New York to Ohio, I can't even tell you how many signs, we love New York. And, Midwesterners don't always love New York. So it was very encouraging to me.
Only New Yorkers don't really appreciate New York sometimes as much. But yes.
We had the best of the human spirit coming together. What I did at Ground Zero is I was stationed to the temporary morgue on site. So when bodies, or more likely pieces of bodies, were recovered, they were brought initially from the pile and then the pit to this little trailer where the part was logged, the date and the time and the place, if it was identifiable. If it wasn't, the medical examiner would tell us probably what part of the body it was. And then I would offer a blessing.
Oh.
And we did the chaplains did 8-hour shifts. So I might follow a Catholic priest who followed a rabbi who followed an imam. So the morgue had a 24-hour clergy
spiritual presence.
But at COVID, with the pandemic, it's so difficult because so much of the loss is hidden. It's even families can't be with their loved ones. So 9/11, we saw, almost 3,000 people die. With the pandemic, it's really only the doctors, the nurses, who are witnessing this trauma, and the numbers are so staggering. It's almost a numb feeling for many of us.
It's so true, because what I said on the funeral home side of it, that the greatest tragedy was that separation in the final moments of death, people dying alone. And when I looked at, when I look back on this time, and people will always ask, they're so curious to know what the perspective was from the funeral home. And it was awful, first of all, begin there. It was awful. It was nothing that we've ever seen in our lifetime. And I always said, this is not the job that I signed up to do, because part of what I do is giving the chance to say goodbye.
Sure.
And doing that in the proper way, in a dignified, proper way, and having the community come out and grieve and honor a life that was lived. And that was robbed from so many people. But hearing those stories of the moments before, being with somebody as they pass is a gut-wrenching yet beautiful thing. And knowing that people were reduced to the FaceTime calls or seeing, and the person who was dying was probably confused and not understanding. Those are the stories that will stick with you forever. Yeah. So you're right. People who not only lost someone, but were deprived the chance to be with them in those final moments. That's a separate grief, I think, in and of itself. I mean, grief is compounded, and there's complex grief. I guess you would call it that.
And as a hospice chaplain for so many years, I cannot tell you how painful it has been for me to know that these families have been deprived those final moments, because for 21 years, I was there helping navigate and helping the families, be with their loved ones and being present for deaths and that kind of holy moment of passing and the chance to say goodbye and to offer comfort and to kind of almost kind of rock your loved one home, And so this has been so painful knowing that families have not been able to do that. And so similarly, the way the doctors and nurses are kind of, God's stand-ins. They're standing in for the families. They're standing in for the angels that I believe that are there.
Mm-hmm.
I never believe that anyone dies alone. There are unseen forces there taking someone from this world to the next. That's my own faith. But the doctors and nurses are stand-ins. The clergy at Ground Zero were stand-ins for families who were yearning for some contact with their loved one, and we were there to represent them and to represent the spirit that was holding them.
Of all that they were tasked to do, the doctors and the nurses, I also think that goes a bit unspoken. That's, the volume of what they saw and the volume of casualty is difficult in and of itself. But having to be that front line between those loved ones who were trying to reach out and were held back by a screen, I think they're just worthy of so much more praise for that job alone.
Absolutely.
Let alone their heroic and life-saving efforts. And it's true. It's until you walk through that moment of watching someone leave this earth, you don't understand it. It's just one of those things. But it's a beautiful thing, and to have been deprived of that just makes your heart go out to so many more people. Hope for the Holidays, once again, will be on Saturday, November 21st at 2 p.m. under a heated tent, socially distanced. Right now, the best way to sign up is to call Cox and Graziano at 914-698-5968 and just say you would like to attend, and we'll take your email address. We'll be able to send you out guidelines and instructions closer to the event. But Reverend Andy, I think so many people who are watching and listening are going to want to learn more from you. Can you tell us, are your books available on Amazon? Are they in local bookstores? And what are the titles of them? Or do you have a collective website where...
I have a website.
You
I was
do,
just saying
even
how
better.
I'm not great at keeping it up to date, but yes, my website is www.revandrearaynor.com.
Andrea, Andrea.
Raynor.
Raynor.
Yeah.
RevAndreaRaynor.com. That's got to be a wonderful resource. Are your books listed on there?
I think they are. You're inspiring me, Jen, to update my website. But if you,
I probably should have had this conversation with you before we went live.
But if you do go on to Amazon and just type in Andrea Raynor under books, you'll see the first one that I did came out in 2009. It's called The Voice That Calls You Home. And it's a collection of stories. Some are hospice vignettes, some are my experiences at 9/11. And then after 9/11, I was diagnosed with cancer. So I've kind of been on both sides of the table.
Yes.
And
yes, you have.
And so the other essays are kind of about my diagnosis and that experience of being on the other side of the medical table.
Humbling, I'm sure, right?
And through that, even though they're difficult topics, I'm always looking for that thread of light and hope. How do we get through things when the other shoe drops? Then I have a memoir called Incognito, Lost and Found at Harvard Divinity School, and that's about how I found my calling to become a minister. The grief book is The Alphabet of Grief.
That's a one. I've read that book. It was inspiring. And you know what? It's real. You could just grab it. You can understand it. It's tangible. It's an actual helpful resource. You don't have to really read between the lines. The information you need is right there. So it's a great read.
I wrote that actually after my dad died, and I was in the middle of doing a bereavement group as well. And so what people were telling me is like, I used to be a great reader, but I can't focus anymore. Mm-hmm. So they're very short, as you know, very short entries using the letters of the alphabet to give it shape. There's a little meditation and an affirmation. Early in grief, some people say, I can only do the meditation at night and the affirmation in the morning. I can't even read the pages. So it's accessible. And the last book is called A Light on the Corner, and it's finding the divine in the everyday. So those are all on Amazon. It's probably a better resource than my website.
Okay, so then we're going to redirect you to Amazon, which everybody knows the web address to that.
Or your local indie bookstore. Some of our bookstores do have the more recent ones.
And I always like to go that route as well. So I'm so glad to work with you as always. On November 21st, we hope to see so many of you there. This is open to everyone. If you know someone who's in need of hope, please tell them to call me at 914-698-5968. Visit Amazon to pick up a copy of one of Reverend Andy's books and come see her on the 21st because she's as genuine as she seems and she really can help find hope during what's going to be a really heavy season. We invite you all to come out. To have loved and lost is a real thing, and we all need a little help sometimes along the way. So that's what we're doing. It's free to the community. Refreshments will be served. I keep using the term socially distanced because I think we have to,
Yeah,
but everything
sure.
will be done to the proper protocols. Reverend Andy, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
You're
the best.
amazing. You've helped so many, and you're going to, God bless you on your mission as you continue to do that.
Thank you,
People
Jen.
need you.
too.
And this is Jen Graziano thanking you for taking the time to listen as we took the time to talk. Have a great day, Westchester. Bye-bye.